When I was looking for scriptures that fit in with our program today of giving thanks for all of our many blessings, I found 50-some references to physical healing. And I picked just a few short ones that I'd like to read for you today. The first is from Jeremiah. "Heal me, O Lord, and I will be healed. Save me, and I will be saved, for you are the one I praise." And then from the New Testament, James, "Is anyone among you sick? Let them call the elders of the church to pray over them and anoint them with oil in the name of the Lord. And the prayer offered in faith will make the sick person well. The Lord will raise them up. If they have sinned, they will be forgiven." And lastly, from Isaiah, "So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." This past Thursday, we all celebrated our very American holiday of Thanksgiving. Lots of good food, lots of family, lots of special time to thank God for all of our many blessings. And what I want to do today is share with you a way that I've kind of worked out to start my daily thanks to God with what I call my Hallelujah Chorus. There are a lot of members of my Hallelujah Chorus, and some of them are sitting in this room today, and I want to tell you some more about them. All of the people in my Hallelujah Chorus have seen the comfort of God's blessing in healing, in some cases from very terrible, serious disease. The newest member of my chorus is my own daughter, Janie, who right about this same time last year was undergoing surgery for a double mastectomy. Incidentally, I think she's going to be with us Christmas Eve singing in our chancel choir, so I hope you'll get a chance to meet her. The miraculous part of Janie's story was that the discovery of her cancer was definitely what Mario likes to call a God incidence. She had had a mammogram in February of 2020, and they saw something they didn't like, and they said, "All right, we want you to be sure to come back in 6 months." That would be August. Well, for the rest of the year 2020, Janie already had all arrangements made. She was spending the rest of the year on a traveling trip all around this country writing. Janie is a writer. And those were her plans. Well, of course, you can imagine what COVID did to those plans. So everything was canceled. So in August, instead of being Lord knows where out in the West, she was back home in Maine, and she went for that second mammogram. They didn't like what they saw. Better have a biopsy. And so she did. And by late September, she was scheduled for a double mastectomy. Now, that in itself would not be so phenomenal, but here was the interesting part. When she had the biopsy, it showed nothing related to the mammogram, but she had a more rare form of cancer, of breast cancer, that would never have shown up on any mammogram. So she had surgery immediately. It would have been a very different story for Janie if we hadn't had the coincidence, the God incidence, that she was home in August and she did have the second mammogram, which led to the further testing, which led to the recognition of this rather rare form of cancer. Now, the importance of an early catch is seen in the next member of my chorus, who's been standing next to me in the alto section of our choir ever since I joined this church. In February of 2014, Roger Paul's primary doctor became concerned about her liver enzyme levels. And he sent her out for testing, checking to see if there might be a cyst on her liver. And there was a shadow there. And so he sent her up to Mayo Clinic for further study. The biopsy said, yeah, nothing serious here with this liver, but I'm sorry to tell you, ma'am, but you have cancer of the pancreas. Now, I don't know what your experience has been, but in my case, I have had many friends and loved ones come up with that diagnosis of pancreatic cancer. And unfortunately, in most cases, it's already in stage 4. The weird thing about pancreatic cancer is there are no particular symptoms, and so the problems that people usually are having are mistaken for something else. And by the time they get around to getting the diagnosis, they only have months, sometimes only weeks, to live. It turned out that Roger's cancer was diagnosed as stage 1A. This was what Janie had had, stage 1A. Roger's doctor said he'd never even seen it come back like that before with pancreatic cancer. So she went through the very devastating Whipple surgery and 6 months of chemo, but she made it. And she's sitting right there. But even better with our story is the God incidents part. Roger just recently shared with me that at some point, she went back to her local doctor to thank him. She wanted to thank him for coming up with that early diagnosis and sending her out to get the test, which led to this discovery. And this is almost unbelievable, but the doctor said to her, I don't remember telling you that. And he pulled up her earlier records and he looked at those x-rays and said, I don't even see anything here that would have sent me or sent you out for further testing. Obviously, the doctor was looking at those x-rays with different eyes that morning, wasn't he? Right. Another outstanding alto in our chancel choir, as well as soloist sometimes, is Stephanie. We call her Sassy Meadows. She started her torturous journey through the straits of cancer back in 2013, where she underwent several surgeries fighting melanoma in an area right under her right eye. Then in the summer of 2015, the dermatologist found 2 more areas of melanoma in that same spot. After several unsuccessful attempts to come up with clear margins, he sent her to another specialist who actually had to keep removing tissue until it had clear margins. He did a skin graft from skin on her neck, which is still sore for her today. And he was able to accomplish all of this without causing damage to her eye. This is what she was so afraid of, because it's all right here. And you know, it's hard to find anything that you could be thankful for about melanoma. But in this case, the fact that she'd had these multiple bouts with melanoma, the doctor sent her to an oncologist specialist who scheduled an MRI just to check to see if there was any more cancer. Another God incidence, once again, early checkup resulted in the sighting of a tumor on Sassy's lung. She went for surgery. The tumor turned out to be malignant, but very small, and they were able to get it all out and remove with clear margins. After a regular series of CT scans, Sassy has now passed the 5-year mark. And she's totally engaged in carrying out what surely must have been an important part of God's plan for her. You've probably seen her with that adorable 3-year-old great-granddaughter named Isabel Rose. We call her Belle. In fact, you are a very much important part of Belle's life. Do you remember? You participated in her baptism just a few months ago, right here in this sanctuary. Sassy is obviously fulfilling what God's plan was for her, because Sassy is providing the major portion of Belle's upbringing and care. And she loves to bring Belle to what Belle calls this her big church. After we'd been closed for a few weeks, they pulled up out front, and Belle goes, "It's open!" She just loves to come to church and to see some of her favorite people, Miss Nancy over in the nursery, Mr. Marvin, who always carries her out to the car, and her Aunt Dory. That's me. Speaking of melanoma, the next member of my choir is here, and she's actually going to come up and tell us her own story. It's a tricky one, Marilyn. Come up and around. I'm going to give you a hand. Can you get over here? I know.
Good morning. In early February 2017, while cleaning vertical blinds in my kitchen, standing on a ladder, I suddenly found myself on the floor, passed out. I didn't fall far, nor did I get hurt. I'd never fallen from a ladder before. I was a little baffled. What did happen was the beginning of a journey of ups and downs that would last nearly 4 months. My journey took me to doctors, surgeons, hospitals, and many specialists. Everyone agreed that something was wrong. The problem was finding out what was giving me unbearable pain and discomfort. It wasn't the fall that had created my pain, but it was the catalyst that started a roller coaster of events. You see, I had cancer. No one knew that, but I had cancer throughout my body. After numerous tests on May 22nd, 2017, I received a diagnosis of stage 4 melanoma. I've had so many procedures for skin cancer, but never melanoma. That was the big one. I was sent to see Dr. Au at the Cancer Center, Advent Health. He's a great doctor. I knew I was in good hands. I requested a second opinion from Moffitt Cancer Center in Tampa, though. The oncologist at Moffitt, she gave me 2 years. Bob and I were devastated. I was treated at Advent Health for a little over a year. When the immunotherapy stopped working, I returned to Moffitt. By this time, there was a research study being conducted, and I qualified for this treatment plan. I want to tell you that being so sick and receiving an immunotherapy treatment that certainly didn't qualify as fun was quite challenging and draining. But the fact of the matter is, my hand was being held during this time. I was led in the direction that I needed to go in, and I was given a strength that I didn't know I possessed. I am fairly certain where that strength was coming from. During my treatment at Moffitt, which at times was extremely painful, Nurse Susan was holding my right hand while God was holding my left. The treatment at Moffitt was a success. Not everyone in this research group had the good fortune that I did. This was a study that called for 5 injections. Yours truly had 9. Always have been an overdoer. The research liaison laughingly said that the drug called PV10 would in the future be called the Marilyn. In May of 2020, I underwent a 3.5-hour surgery that removed all the dead cancer. When I asked my surgical oncologist what my official designation was, he informed me that I am to say that I have stage 4 melanoma, which has been treated successfully. Music to my ears. I still question why I wasn't taken home during this journey. My outlook was pretty bleak. When questioning my existence here, I have been told that I still have work to do. I'm still not clear as to what that work involves, but I have been told that I have an inspiring story to tell others that may be experiencing what I experienced for over 3 years. I didn't take this walk with cancer alone. I had my family, friends, lots of prayers, and some really great doctors, plus some purely wonderful meals provided by this church. I truly felt a calmness, a hope, and strength that could only have come from God. Dr. Al from Advent Health says I am truly a walking miracle. And did I fail to mention that as I was enduring my trials by fire, that my dear sweet husband was dealing with cancer and heart issues? God was surely kept busy leading us both during our times of illness. God doesn't want us to have pain and suffering, so he is walking right there next to us and holding our hands. Thank you.
In the choir, we often sing an anthem that talks about the plan I have for you. That's God's plan for us. Obviously, with these stories that we've heard so far today, God had plans for these people. Certainly, it's obvious with Sassy and the plans for the impact that she is having on that little girl's life. And our next member of my chorus is another gal who beat all the odds against her recovery, made an amazing contact, and she's still undoubtedly marching, maybe kayaking, marching along. Of course, we're talking about April von Maxey. In April of 2017, Anne Marie and Frank Monroe, Sassy Meadows and I were with Leon Bloater on one of his trips to Israel. Just shortly after we arrived at the Sea of Galilee, we got word that April had been taken to the hospital with a worst case kind of pneumonia. She crashed on the night of the 20th, and they determined that she had necrotizing pneumonia, which was slowly eating away at her lung tissue, along with a severe case of sepsis. With the liver 4 times its usual size and possible kidney involvement, the odds for April's recovery were about 4%. We 4 Holy Land pilgrims, along with the rest of our group and Leon, prayed every chance that we got and in every holy place that we visited. In fact, prayers for April's recovery were in the thousands. It wasn't just our church family that prayed for her. It was church family members all over this country, and her family, and her students, and their family, and the teachers. Thousands of prayers were going up to God for healing for our girl. At this point, a very special specialist, entered the picture, and he recommended that April undergo an ECMO, ECMO, probably new words for most of you. Similar to the heart bypass, with the ECMO, they just run these tubes in and out of your heart and just bypass the lungs, leaving the lungs out of the process in order to give them a chance to heal. For 10 days, April lay in a medically induced coma while God and her own body worked to heal her. The doctors said, oh, well, she'll have to be on this bypass for several weeks. But husband Kevin said, you guys don't know my wife. She's a fighter. Let's wake her up. Wake her up and let her help us. Let her help us. And so they did. And so she did. Thanks to her own good physical state of health, and even more, her own strong determination and her faith, she surprised them all. Yeah, she still has a hole in one lung, and she still experiences some post-sepsis syndromes with severe bouts of fatigue, but you still see her swinging those big bells in the choir. In fact, you're going to be seeing her on the 12th when they're having their big concert. And sometimes you see her up here with the brass playing either the clariphone or the saxophone, even though some people said, oh, you'll never be able to do that again. Not April. But what you don't have the opportunity to see is all of the kids that April's has touched their lives through her virtual teaching and through the coaching and working with the different athletic teams. If you're a friend on Facebook, you even get to share in their family camping trips where they're camping, they're hiking, and of course, kayaking. Between April and Kevin, there's no way to count the thousands of kids whose lives they have touched. Most recently, there was a picture on Facebook of 60-plus kids at their house on a Sunday afternoon, a tradition that goes on every year with kids from one of their athletic teams. Don't you know every one of those kids is going to remember them the rest of their lives? There's no doubt that we can see what God's plan was for her. Well, these are my 5 stories. And of course, there's always more to the rest of the story. And there are many more stories out there. I know that those of you sitting here with me today and those of you watching at home, you have stories to tell too. But wait, I know what some of you are thinking. Yeah, this is all great, but what about me? What about my story? What about my story, my prayers for one of my loved ones didn't work out quite the way I had hoped for? We don't know what God's plan is. We have no way of knowing. All we really know is that he has a plan, and John's going to come talk to you a little more about that.
Tough act to follow. Proverbs 21. Many are the plans in the mind of a man, but it is the purpose of the Lord that will stand. I certainly believe that God has a plan for all of us. The hard part is figuring out just what it is. I'm going to share a little bit about my story and tell you how I think God has intervened in my life and directed me to this particular point. Like many of you, I grew up in the church. I was born in Orlando, and my mother was a Sunday school teacher in First Presbyterian Church of Orlando, and if it was Sunday, we were going to Sunday school and we were going to church, and Dr. Dendy would give a 20-minute prayer. And I knew that every Sunday, John went to church. I refused to go to the fellowship in the evening, though. Believe it or not, I was a very shy and quiet young boy that had difficulty in larger groups. But if it was Sunday, once again, I was in church. I graduated from high school and went to college, went to a good Baptist college, Wake Forest in North Carolina. And even though I was in the dorm, it was Sunday, and I went to church. That lasted for about 6 weeks. And then John decided that he had heard the message, if you don't behave, you're going to hell 4 times. He didn't need to hear it anymore. And so he quit going to church. I did enjoy my religion class. I had 2 classes I took. The professor was a retired Navy chaplain, and I got a lot of great information about the history and a lot of the background, and he never told me or never judged us in the religion class. I graduated from college and entered the adult society. I got married and experienced the miracle of birth. I was in that transition period. The first 2 arrived, and the procedure was you drop mom off at the door, and they'll come tell you later. The last two, entirely different. We go in together, and I'll never forget, it was 1034, and Peter Jackson was born, and hang on here. And it was a great, fantastic feeling, a miracle there. Along came another one, Mark. I'm a city boy. I grew up in Orlando, and somehow I ended up in agriculture. And that is because of Mr. Thermodynamics. And Mr. Thermodynamics convinced me that engineering was really not going to be my strong suit. So I ended up coming to Lake County, and that's another long story. And I found a job that was made for me, and I was made for it. I loved it every minute, well, almost every minute. There were a few times that were difficult. But I feel like I made a contribution and many lifelong friends. When we arrived here, the old urge and the need to be in church on Sunday was still there, especially with children. I felt it was really important that my children grow up in the church and be a part of the church like I was. It didn't take too long before someone said, hey, you've got a big mouth. Why don't you teach vacation Bible school? And one thing led to another, and I was teaching classes, and the classes were teaching me. I had a fifth grade Sunday school class, and there were 4 young ladies in the class who were very perceptive. Your daughter was one, and another one in the class, and Dina Barnett, Wendy Wilson. But anyway, sometimes John wasn't able to get as well prepared as he needed to for Sunday school. And these young ladies were very perceptive. Mr. Jackson, looks like it might have been a rough night last night. Why don't you let us just take charge? We can handle things today. And they would carry me through the lesson. What a wonderful experience. I was asked to be an elder and have participated in the structure of this church for a long time. But it always wasn't a pleasant time. In fact, there were a couple times that the situation got to be rather difficult. And I have to admit that, quite truthfully, rather than hang in here and solve a problem, I left the church, quit coming to church, and was going to hang in there on my own rather than deal with the issues. Went through some challenges at my house as well. Many years of being married ended in divorce, and difficult thing to go through. But as always seems to happen, things intervene, and I was attending a funeral of a friend of mine in Claremont, and I was sitting in the back, and people were talking about Joan and her involvement, and I looked around the church, and people were nodding. Somebody would say, oh, and remember when Joan did the quilt? And I could see this whole church was part of Joan's family. And yes, we remember this. And it just hit me in the head and said, you know, you got to get back to church. You got to get in there where people are sharing your lives. And so I made the decision it was time for me to get back to church where I belong. Other things take place in your lives. You have to follow this very carefully now, but Catherine's daughter is married to the uncle of my grandchildren. Sounds a little incestuous there, but it's not really. And we would have gatherings, and her daughter attended. I would say, well, how's your mom? And finally she said, why don't you just call her up and ask her? And one thing led to another, and lo and behold, Catherine and I have been dating for a while now and attending church together. There have been some events that have taken place in my life that are very memorable and powerful, and others very subtle. I would travel back and forth to Gainesville quite often. That's where the home office was. I was a faculty member at the University of Florida, and we used to have these awe-inspiring conferences in Gainesville. But anyway, I would drive through Pedro and down the country road, and there's a sign on the side of the road, and it says, Jesus loves you. I went by that sign hundreds of times, but I can remember very clearly coming back from time in Gainesville one day. I saw that sign, and all of a sudden, there was this great, big, wonderful man with a smile on his face. His arms were open. He just wrapped his arms around me. I could feel the warmth. It was fantastic. And I never forget that. How many times did I drive by that sign? How many times do you drive by a sign or see someone that says God loves you? And he took that opportunity to speak to me. A few other things. About 1979, I died in the emergency room. I had a heart problem called Wolff-Parkinson-White, which meant my heart would get into a very rapid pace. And normally it would convert on its own, but the older I got and the more I had been in these events, it quit converting. And so I was experiencing an episode and went to the emergency room. And Tommy Langley was the doctor in the emergency room. Don't worry, John, we'll get you back. And I'm in there, and Tommy is giving me a medicine to convert my heart. Well, fortunately, Tommy asked Craig Spencer, my cardiologist, called him up, and Craig came down there. Well, about the third medicine that Tommy Langley gave me didn't have the desired results, and I don't remember anything that happened except that when I woke up, my chest was extremely sore, and evidently the medicine that Tom gave me caused me to flatline, and paramedics jumped on top, and fortunately Craig Spencer had another medicine that he tried that brought me around. Unfortunately, there was no out-of-body experience for me, and that really upsets me. I mean, if I was going to go through all of that, the least he could have done was let me have a view of what was going on. So that was the first part of the heart deal. It was kind of a miracle. I continued to have some heart issues and had what is called AFib. And one way they deal with AFib is they run a catheter in there and they do all kind of wonderful stuff. So it finally got to the point where I said, I got to have the ablation done. So I go in and I have the ablation. The next day, the doctor comes in and says, man, that was tough. I said, what do you mean? He said, normally I run the catheter in there and I just go through this wall and go someplace and do all this. He said, but your wall was wavy and I couldn't get my catheter through there. And I thought, we're going to have to do open heart surgery on this guy sometime down the road. But it just so happened there was a salesperson with the doctor. I don't know how techs get into a surgery, but she said, why don't you try my catheter? It's a little bit longer. And so he takes this catheter from the salesperson, and lo and behold, it was long enough to go through the membrane, and everything was a success. Man, how many times you think that there's a surgery and there's a tech rep that has a catheter that's 2 millimeters long? Hey, life is full of coincidences, right? And then there's the story of people who don't pay attention to instructions. Catherine's son Keith out here, his daughter Riley went in for a high school physical. You know, you go and they pass it and everything else. And I believe the story is that they saw a lump on her neck and said, you ought to take care of that or have someone check it out. They did. Early stages of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Treatment was completely successful. Fine young lady, healthy. you ought to take care of that. Sometimes we may ought to follow our instructions and pay attention to what's going on. You know, I also have learned that sometimes failures can really be good. In the late 70s and early 80s, Citrus was a tax shelter. And I don't understand all the ramifications there. All I know is that there was a guy in Virginia that was a financial advisor, and he hired me as a horticultural consultant. And we looked at grows and everything else, and next thing you know, he puts together a plan and people buy into it, and he makes money. And he didn't know the difference between a marsh grapefruit and a Hamlin orange, and he's making a ton of money. So I'm thinking, man, this is pretty easy. I know all there is to know about citrus. I'm going to make some money. So I get an attorney and a local CPA, highly respected, highly competent, who decided that we're going to put together a limited partnership, and we're going to do really good in the citrus business. And so we did. I thought it was a dadgum good presentation, Richard. Unfortunately, only people that were interested in this were family members of mine. I couldn't sell the partnerships. We were in dire trouble. Fortunately, I found someone who was looking for a tax write-off that year, sold my contract. November the 15th, 1983, I'm out of the risk of having to pay off the loan I took out to put a down payment on the grove. December 25th, 1983, the grove was killed to the ground. My failure to sell the partnership was the best thing that ever happened to me, or I would have been trying to deal with a lot of unhappy investors, Bob. And you know, unhappy investors are not somebody that you want to deal with. So that's kind of John's life. One of the great experiences in my religious career was I participated in the baptism of my father. 82 years old, he decides to get baptized. I get to hold the water at the First Presbyterian Church in Orlando. Kind of a special event. So I'm going to wind up here, and I'm going to tell you that God is in control, and there are many lessons that I've learned, and I want to share just a couple things. I like to tell my children and grandchildren all my little lessons. Early on, I had an issue that was really bothering me, and I went to Gainesville to talk to a colleague of mine, Dr. Earl Kelly, remarkable man, and he told me, he said, John, the problem with you is that you're focusing on the wrong thing. You're focusing on the problem, and it's eating at you, and you need to be focusing on Jesus and what would he do. As Mario likes to say, you know, we really don't need to tell God how big our problems are. We need to tell our problems how big our God is. And so I learned then that if I could take the focus off of that thing that was irritating me and try to say, well, how would Jesus do? What would he do in this situation? It helped me out quite a bit. I also realized that we're not in this life alone. Pretty easy to say we are involved, but I've been on many teams in my career that made me look good. And it's been obvious that we are in this thing together, and it's not just about me, it's about other people. And so I've been trying to instill that into my grandchildren that you're not the most important person. You know, let's look what we can do for other people. I've also learned that blessings are a two-way street. We say quite often that I'm sure blessed to have you in my life and everything else. But you know, when you look at it, there's a flip side of that. For every person that is a blessing to you, you have the opportunity to be a blessing to them. And so I think that even though you might not realize it, you're a blessing to many people, and they look up to you, and it's very helpful. you know, when we're all in this together, it is amazing what an uplifting situation it can be. As most of you know, a couple of months ago, my 45-year-old son died. And it's difficult to deal with that. But I want to tell you how important it was to know that the church was praying for me and for my family. And to know, to get all those cards, and I got a lot of cards, mostly from you here in church. Kids don't send cards anymore. They send you a text. And a text saying, I'm sorry, doesn't really have the impact of a card that you sent, and I have the box of cards. And so we're in this together, and your prayers, your cards are very important. And our prayers that we give out, I think, probably have far more impact than you really realize. I know that God loves all of us, and he provides opportunities for us to share our love and share his love with other people. So I'm going to encourage you to do that. When it comes time to volunteer, go ahead and step up and help with Center Street's Kitchen or help with some of these other places. What used to really upset me a little bit was I would ask someone to help with the church or one thing or another, and the answer was, well, I've already put my time in. And so when Ann Rao said, we'd like for you to be an elder, I almost said, Ann, I've gone through that for 3 terms. I've put my time in, I've been here, I've done that. You know, let someone else do it. And then I said, dadgummit, you're the person that I'd hated to hear tell me that. So I said, yes, I will. And and I'm extremely pleased that I was. The last lesson is that after having walked away a couple times, I know it's critical that we need to be worshiping and be a part of a church. And I harass my kids about coming to church all the time. But it's important that we gather together here and in today's technology there, that we can share with each other and we can worship with each other. So, I want to conclude. I know that God is in control. I can't figure out what his purpose is all the time, but I know that I'm going to continue to walk forward in faith, to join you in worshiping, and realize many are the plans in the mind of a man, but it's the purpose of the Lord that will stand. And all God's children said, amen.